Hi everyone, and welcome to this tutorial on the pretty crazy new centerpiece model for the Necrons, the Void Dragon. In part 1 I'm going to cover painting all the metal parts of him, and I had a real issue trying to figure out what sub-assemblies to do. When you assemble him, he's really nice to put together and it's really clever, but if I hold him by the spear he's going to wobble everywhere, if I hold him by his leg he's going to wobble everywhere. There's not really anywhere I can pin him. So all I did was tack in the wings with a little bit of super glue, and I'm going to use those to hold him with. To base coat the body, I'm going to do a 50-50 mix of Hexed Lichen and black metal. I've thinned this 50-50 again with thinner in my airbrush, and I'm spraying at 20 psi. There's going to be a lot of airbrush use on this model, it really lends itself to it. If I'm honest, I think you could achieve very similar results with dry brushing as well on this model. So just giving the whole body a couple of smooth coats with this slightly purple-blue metal mixture. This whole tutorial is going to be a bit of a homage, or whatever you want to call it, to metallic paints and working with them. So here I've been able to completely change the colour of one by adding in a non-metallic paint, in this case Hexed Lichen. And the reason Hexed Lichen works particularly well is because it's a very, very saturated and thin paint, so it behaves an awful lot like an ink. So if you wanted to manipulate your silvers or your golds or whatever, you could look at using an ink instead. The only issue with the inks is they are really full on and often can overpower whatever you put in. I'm also going to be using a lot of scale 75 metallic colours. We're in no way affiliated with them, but since they've come out a few years ago, I can't remember a project I've worked on where I haven't used at least one of the scale 75 metallic sets. It's also going to be quite challenging in this video filming a largely reflective model, so I hope it comes out okay. He's had about 2 to 3 smooth coats all over. To highlight, I'm going to use Vallejo Model Air Steel, and I've thinned this slightly less than 50-50 as it's already a very airbrush friendly paint, and I'm going to hit the model from above. So I'm spraying downwards onto him, trying to catch all those upward facing surfaces, and I'm just starting on the back because there's quite a lot of pressure on this model. This metal, the skin, it's such a huge focal point of the miniature. So I'm just going to start on the back, get my eye in, that way I don't have to worry about mucking up anything on the front. And as I say, I'm hitting all those surfaces that the light would reflect off if we had a light source directly above. And maybe ever so slightly off to the right as we look at it. You can see we've left that lovely violet shade in the recesses and underneath. But we've brought back that pure silver colour on the flats and on the upward facing surfaces. And then straight over that silver I'm going to spray Scale 75 Emerald Alchemy. And this is this lovely green turquoise metallic paint. I thin this 50-50. All of the Scale 75 metallics you really need to shake thoroughly. If you've left them on the shelf for a long time, you look over at the bottles and you think, I don't remember buying 20 bottles of turquoise paint. But you give them a shake and they mix in nicely. And I'm just going to build this up slowly over the silver. I've almost used that silver or the steel colour before as like I would use white in a pre-highlight. So I want to cover the vast majority of it now with the green. But it's worth building up slowly rather than just hitting it in one go. It means we can get some nice subtleties. I'm sure a few people may be wondering why not use something like the Vallejo shifters paints, the colour shifting paints? They're cool, like they certainly have a place. I enjoy painting like this instead because I have more control over where the light and the shadow is, and therefore I can control what colour, what part of the model is. I'm not beholden just to how the model's facing the light, which you are with the shifting paints. But if you were really stretched for time, yeah, I'm sure you could just blat it with one of those and it'd probably look pretty cool. Now you can see that green starting to show. I'm starting to get a very cool effect on him. You see underneath, it's still pretty much pure purple. A little bit more from the left hand side, or his left hand side, our right hand side. There we are, I can see on the thigh there, it's picked out really nicely. Now give the whole model a couple of coats of Vallejo polyurethane gloss varnish. And this is because I want to do a little bit of pin washing, not loads, and this will just give me a nicer surface to work over. So to pin wash, I'm using Games Workshop Pterodon Turquoise contrast paint. I've thinned it down a little bit with some water, and I've just decided to try and pick out those weird pixelated bits. And then I'm also going to work through some of the recesses in his musculature. But I'm only going to go for those ones that are facing away from the light. If our light is shining directly down like it is on his left thigh there, those recesses would be light because they are facing the light. Whereas if we just did a traditional wash, it wouldn't make as much sense. Hope I explained that. That's the subject of a whole other video. His feet and his hands offered a good opportunity to get plenty of that turquoise in though. And this is something years and years ago Andy showed me. He was painting a metallic sword and was saying how you could make shade and highlight true metallics to make them interesting. And he used green and purple. So he used that contrast of colour. And it just looked so cool. So I thought this would be a nice opportunity to use that idea. Now I wanted to reinforce the purple shadows, so I've gone back to my Hexed Lichen mix with the black metal, and I'm just manipulating the model in such a way that I can reinforce that colour in some of the shadows. You know, we're still painting this model for our army, but he is a centrepiece. So we can take a little bit longer, get him just how we want him. And once that was done, I give the whole model a couple of coats of satin varnish by Ammo by MIG. Started using their varnishes recently. Really big fan, just straight out of the pot, no thinning, sprayed through 20 psi, fantastic finish. And the reason I've sprayed a satin rather than a gloss is because it's going to give me options later if I want to go even brighter with certain areas or shinier rather with certain areas. So I've blacked out the other areas to better emphasise what we've worked on, and I think it looks really cool. And hopefully you see it wasn't a huge amount of work. For the other metal parts on the model, for the sort of canoptek construct stuff, I'm going to use exactly the same recipe as we used on our Necron warrior from the Indomitus box set. So I'm going to base coat this with scale 75 Decayed Metal. And then I'm going to highlight it with scale 75 Victorian Brass. And this is so when we field the army, it's going to look consistent. Do the same on the wings, or the veins, I guess. And then to highlight, I'm just going to dry brush Scale 75 Moonstone Alchemy. Quite a thin paint, so it's not the easiest thing to dry brush with. And now a quick wash or a heavy glaze or whatever you want to call it of very, very watered down Scale 75 Fantasy Games Despair Green. And this is just to tint the armour, give it a slightly sort of older, more matte finish. As I say, it's exactly the recipe that we've used on the Indomitus Necron. I'm just repeating it here for completeness. I think it's important that we make sure we tie these centerpiece models into the rest of the army. I think sometimes you can put loads and loads of work into your characters to the point where they just don't fit with the rest of the army, they just don't make sense. So one of those little extra steps I wanted to take was to actually edge highlight with my brush using Moonstone Alchemy. As I said, to dry brush with, it's okay, but it's not amazing. I'm just going in along all the edges, picking them out. This is particularly impactful on metals because you get that nice contrast where you have a very bright part next to a darker part, which makes the thing look more reflective. I've just snapped the wings off him to do this. As I said, I used the tiniest drop of super glue to attach them, and therefore when I wanted to take them off I could just gently snap it. Didn't cause any damage. Now the last metals are going to be on his headpiece. I'm using Scale 75 Old Copper. Absolutely love this colour. Its coverage isn't brilliant, especially just straight over black. So I gave it a couple of coats. And then to help tie it into the rest of the model, because I was conscious at this point we've got quite a few colours on this chap, I've used a very, very thin down wash of our black metal and Hexed Lichen mix that we used to base coat the body in. This has just helped to harmonise the model where we can, and also just to knock it back a little. Now I'm going to sponge on my first highlight using Scale 75 Pure Copper. This is a wonderful metallic pinky copper colour. GW Screaming Bell is not dissimilar. But if you buy the copper set from Scale 75, it's got both of these in, so that's why I was using this. Being very, very careful around areas where I don't want to get it. Bit silly if I'm honest, I should probably have gone in with my brush on those parts, but I got away with it. Always gone back again, but no, I got away with it. And the sponging just gives a little texture as well. Lastly, I'm going to do a touch of edge highlighting with Scale 75 Tourmaline Alchemy. And this really is a metallic pink. It's an awesome colour. And although we have got a lot of colours on this guy already, they should be harmonious. The turquoise, the purple, the orange, the pink, they all work together quite nicely. And as I say, when I was considering how to paint him, I just thought I'd have some fun and lean into the fact that I love these Scale 75 metallics. This is where we're going to leave him for now. I've gone back in and blacked out the other details again just to really highlight what we've worked on in this video. And in the next video we'll look to finish the model. So we'll look at painting the black stone, we'll look at painting the energy coils that are around him. I hope you've enjoyed it. It was certainly an interesting challenge to paint this model, and I'm really pleased with the result. I hope you can see that there's not a huge amount of complexity to getting these results, but also it highlights again just the value in using something like an airbrush, or as I said earlier, a dry brush, to achieve some really cool results even on a centerpiece model. So if you have enjoyed the video, then please give it a like, and if you want to support us, then hit the subscribe button. It really helps us out. And I'll see you next time.